Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. We are from Group 2 and we will present the material about traditional method in language teaching. As we know that there are so many various types of traditional method in language teaching, and now we will explain more about three methods, which are GTM or grammar translation method, direct method, and also audio-lingual method. First, let's talk about the GTM or grammar translation method. So, this method also known as classical method, and it emphasizes three things, which are grammar rules, vocabulary list, and also translation. And the purpose of this method is not for oral communication, but to help learners to read and understand the literature. For the examples, if you do a translation literary passages, reading comprehension questions, deductive application of grammar rules, and memorization also fill in the blanks exercise, that's a GTM. Now let's talk about strengths and also weaknesses of GTM. As its name, of course, GTM can build strong grammar and vocabulary knowledge that can indirectly improve students' ability in reading and writing. GTM also can provide structured learning through rules that can develop students' intellectual and analytical discipline. And how about the weaknesses? First, I have said that GTM can improve students' ability in reading and writing, but remember that reading and writing are passive skills, so we can conclude that GTM is lack of active skills like listening and speaking. The second, GTM is overly teacher-centered. As we know that in traditional classroom, when the teacher implement grammar translation method, they only transfer their knowledge to the students, which can limit students' change to actively participate in learning process. For the third point is lack of real communication process. Actually, it's still related to the first one, that GTM is lack of speaking activity, and of course it can impact our ability in daily communication. For the fourth point, GTM can be memorization heavy and monotone. We all know that in traditional classroom, when the teacher implement a grammar translation method, they only ask the student to write down the formulas and memorize them. But actually, it's not effective and it can be very boring and monotone. And the last point, GTM only see culture as a literature or fine arts. It means that we only focus on the written cultural product like literature, but we don't do more exploration in another cultural product. That's all for the grammar translation method, and the next material will be delivered by Marwa Aulianissa.
Okay, the next method is direct method. Direct method is when we want to teach or learn another language, especially English. We need to use the target language only when we learn. So, in this method, the mother tongue is avoided. Teachers and students use only the target language, in our case, English, during the class. New vocabulary is not translated but explained directly with real objects, pictures, gestures, or situation. Grammar is not taught by giving rules first but through examples, so students discover the rules by themselves. For example, instead of saying we add as for third person singular, the teacher just gives example like I eat rice, she eats rice, and students will notice the pattern. And now, how do we apply this in real classroom? Let's imagine teaching young learners. The teacher brings a real apple and says, "This is an apple." The students repeat and maybe even pass the apple around. To teach actions, the teacher drinks water and says, "I am drinking." Then ask students to act and say it too. For grammar, instead of explaining the past tense rule, the teacher tells a short story like, yesterday I played football, yesterday I watched TV, and let students catch the meaning and pattern. And finally, the teacher can ask them to role play situations like buying food in a canteen. This way, language is practiced directly without translation. And now, what is the strength and the weakness for this method? First is the strength. This method has some clear strength. It develops speaking and listening very fast because students are forced to use the target language directly. It also helps students think in English instead of translating from their first language. Vocabulary becomes easier to remember because it's linked with real situations, and the class feels more dynamic because there is a lot of interaction. And for weaknesses, of course, there are also weaknesses. It is not easy to apply in big classes, especially if there are many students and not enough time to everyone to practice speaking. It also requires teachers who are fluent and confident in the target language, which is not always be the case. Beginners sometimes feel confused if everything is in English, and reading or writing skills can be left behind at the early stages. Okay, that's all for the direct method, and the next material will be delivered by Annisa Maharani.
The audio-lingual method is an oral-based approach in learning languages. It was developed in the United States during the 1940s and the 1950s. The focus is not on vocabulary but on drilling students with sentence patterns. It was influenced by structural linguistics, especially Charles Price, and by behavior psychology, especially Skinner. The idea is that students can form new language habits by repetition, conditioning, and reinforcement. In the audio-lingual method, the teacher uses only English and avoids translation into the student's first language. Students learn through dialogues, imitation, and repetition. Grammar rules are not explained directly, but students understand them from examples and practice. This method is teacher-centered. The teacher controls the lessons and students are expected to repeat. In a typical audio-lingual classroom, the teacher introduces dialogue. Students listen carefully and then repeat each line after the teacher. If students have difficulty, the teacher breaks the sentence into smaller parts using the backward build-up drill. After practicing many times, students take the rule. The teacher also used different types of drills to strengthen the pattern. There are several kinds of drills in the audio-lingual method. First, the repetition drills. In these drills, students simply repeat after the teacher. It helps them practice correct pronunciation and written. Second, the backward build-up drill. If a sentence is long or difficult, the teacher breaks it into small parts. Students start repeating from the end and then build up to the full sentence. This makes it easier to say correctly. And the third, the substitution drill. Here, students replace a word or phrase with a new one. For example, instead of saying I'm going to the post office, they can say I'm going to the bank. This trains students to use the same pattern with different vocabulary. Fourth, the transformation drill. In this drill, students change the form of a sentence. For example, turning a statement into a question, like she is going to park becomes is she going to the park? It helps students practice a grammar automatically. And finally, the chain drill. In this activity, students practice in turns. One student asks a question, the next student answers, and then continues the chain with another questions. This makes practice more interactive and involve the whole class. So these drills are the main techniques that build habits in the audio-lingual method. So for the conclusion is in different traditional teaching, different methods show different focus. The grammar translation method emphasizes grammar and translation. The direct method promotes a communication without translation, and the audio-lingual method trains habit through drills. All of them have their own strengths and weaknesses. Together, they illustrate the shift from learning about a language to actively using it. That's all from us. Thanks for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.